Abusive husband pours boiling water on his wife for refusing to sign. 20% of her fortune unaware her lawyer was recorded everything. He didn't just assault her, he tried to melt her dignity away, one drop of scalding water at a time. In the cold, sterile kitchen of the home she paid for, he revealed the monster he had hidden behind a husband's smile. "You ungrateful bitch," Marcus roared, his hand cracking across her face, the slap echoing in the silence. "You think you can say no to me?" He kicked her when she fell, his fists a brutal storm she had endured in secret for too long. "Sign 20% or I'll peel it from your skin." Those were the words he spat as she cowered, her tears hissing on the hot floor. When her bleeding lip whispered, "No," he snapped. He grabbed the steaming kettle. Instead of a partner, he became her torturer. He poured the boiling water over her arm and chest, her screams swallowed by the walls of their mansion. He left her writhing in agony, believing he had broken her. But what he never knew was that Alara wasn't alone. Her trembling fingers had dialed her lawyer moments before, a desperate plea for help. And that lawyer, listening from his car just outside the gate, had recorded everything. Every slap, every threat, the click of the kettle, and the agonizing screams that would become his downfall. Sometimes the man who thinks he is the predator is just the animal walking into a cage. Sometimes the woman you try to burn becomes the fire that consumes you whole. This is not just another tale of abuse. It is the raw evidence of a crime. It is the story of a survivor who refused to sign her name in ink, so her husband wrote his confession in violence. And it is the reminder that the brightest light of justice often comes from the darkest recordings. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch this and do not subscribe, it is like letting his crimes go unwitnessed. But when you click that button, you become the jury. You stand with Alara. You demand justice. Please, subscribe now. And in the comments, share where you're watching from. Let Alara know she is not fighting this battle alone. Just sign it, love. The words were a soft kiss, but the grip on her shoulder was a vice. Alara Hayes flinched, a small, practiced movement she hated. The smell of Marcus's expensive cologne, usually a comfort, was suffocating. He was standing too close. His thumb dug into the delicate bone of her shoulder, a silent, brutal reminder of who was in charge. In front of them, on the sterile, white marble island, lay an invoice for consulting fees to a company she had never heard of. It was for $50,000. This was the part she hated most. The part where Dr. Alara Hayes, a woman whose mind could map complex protein chains and innovate biotech solutions, had to pretend to be a simple, pliant wife. She was the heiress to the Hayes pharmaceutical fortune, but she was also a brilliant scientist in her own right. Her father, Arthur Hayes, had raised her to be his equal, his successor. He had taught her to read a balance sheet before she could drive. And now, she was this, a woman who flinched. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, was a man sculpted by ambition. He had walked into her life from nothing, with a past as empty as his pockets. With his sharp smile and disarming charisma, he had convinced her he was everything. Now, he managed her legacy, and he resented every moment that she remembered it was hers. He leaned in, his perfectly handsome face now cold and tight. "Don't trouble your pretty head with the details, Alara. That's what you have me for." "He's right, E." A bright, cheerful voice cut the tension. "Serafina Sarah." Davies bustled in, a vision in a sharp, stylish pantsuit that Alara knew, guiltily, she had paid for. Sarah slid a steaming mug of Alara's favorite coffee onto the counter. "You know how these corporate sharks are." Sarah was Alara's oldest friend, the one who had held her hand at her father's funeral. Or so Alara believed. After Sarah's event planning business failed, Alara had created the position of personal assistant for her. A pity job, Marcus had called it. A lifeline, Alara had insisted. Now Sarah lived with them, a constant, energetic presence. But as Sarah smiled at Alara, her eyes just for a second flickered to Marcus with an unreadable, knowing intensity. Alara's hand, shaking slightly, reached for the pen. But her father's voice, a ghost in her memory, whispered, "Check the ledgers, Alara. Always check the ledgers." She hesitated. The pen hovered over the paper. I just don't recognize this vendor, Marcus," she said, her voice small, hating the apology in it. What's Thorn Analytics? Marcus's grip tightened. The charm was gone. It's a new consulting firm I'm using. We're restructuring. It's details, Alara. Boring? Just sign it. I have a meeting. Oh, don't be difficult, Sarah chimed in, laughing lightly. It's just 50,000. Your charity luncheon is costing 3 times that. Let the man work. The combined pressure, the casual dismissal, it worked. Alara's shoulders slumped. The scientist retreated, and the wife took her place. Of course. You're right, I'm sorry. But before her pen could touch the paper, the door to the kitchen burst open, slamming against the wall so hard a small frame fell off a shelf. Marcus was back, but he was a different man. The cold, controlled mask was gone. He was pale, his $5,000 suit jacket crumpled in one fist. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wide with a terror Alara had never seen. The unsigned invoice lay forgotten between them. Alara, they're ruining us, he shouted, his voice cracking. They're taking everything. Sarah's lipstick mouth fell open. Alara's heart stopped. She had been afraid of his anger, but his fear was a new suffocating darkness. He was looking at her, not as a wife, but as a life raft. And his frantic eyes told her he was about to demand she let him carve off a piece of her just to stay afloat. They're going to freeze everything, Alara. Everything. Marcus burst into the mahogany-paneled office, not with the feigned panic of the morning, but with the raw, rank terror of a cornered animal. It was past 10 at night. The day had been a long, agonizing hell of his whispered, angry phone calls and the slamming of doors. Now, he threw a thick, leather-bound document onto her father's antique desk. The sound made her jump. The hostile takeover of the subsidiary. It failed. He panted, his expensive suit jacket crumpled in one fist. He was talking fast, his charm stripped away to reveal something desperate and ugly. They're claiming mismanagement. My mismanagement. They're coming for us, Alara. They'll seize the accounts. Your father's legacy, our life. It's over. He clawed at his hair. A performance so total it was almost believable. Unless, he jabbed the finger at the document. I can fix it. I have a plan, a last-ditch lifeline. But I need you to sign this. Now. Tonight. Alara stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sign what? Marcus, what is this? It's a simple transfer, he snapped, already pulling a gold pen from his jacket. 20% of your private fortune, just as collateral. We show them the funds as proof of good faith. They back off, I fix the books, and I have it back in your account in a week. It's the only way, Alara. Sign it. He shoved the pen into her hand, but the cold metal against her skin, his frantic eyes, the word collateral, it all sent a shockwave of cold clarity through her. The panic she'd felt that morning had crystallized. This was too fast. This was wrong. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, a low, steady rumble from years ago. Never sign a thing in a panic, Alara. Panic is a bully. You look it in the eye, and you make it wait. Her hand was trembling, but she didn't sign. She pulled her hand back and picked up the document. Alara, we don't have time for this, he barked. I'm reading it, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. She forced her eyes to focus, to push past the dense, suffocating legal jargon, and then she saw them. The words. They leaped off the page, burning into her brain. Liquidation of all assets. Irrevocable transfer. To the sole ownership of the Marcus Thorne Private Holding Company, granting all attached voting shares. She looked up. The fear was still there, but it was now frozen, hardened into a shield of anger. Marcus, this isn't collateral. He froze. What are you talking about? Sign it. This is a liquidation, she said, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she possessed. It's a permanent transfer of $50 million to your private holding company. This gives you 20% of my voting shares in Hayes Industries. This makes you my partner. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. His handsome, the face she had loved and trusted, contorted into an ugly, unfamiliar snarl. Don't be stupid. Do you want to be poor? Is that it? After everything I've done for you? Just sign the damn thing, Alara. He lunged for the pen, but she recoiled, clutching the document to her chest. For one terrifying second she thought he would hit her. His phone buzzed violently on his hip, a shrill, demanding sound. He roared in frustration, snatching it up. "I have to take this. Don't you move." He stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Elara didn't breathe. She scrambled from the desk and locked the heavy mahogany door. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial. The phone rang once, twice. Ben. The voice was a steel rod. Ben Carter. He wasn't just her lawyer. He was her father's oldest friend, his protege, the man who had taught her to ride a bike and later to read a balance sheet. He was fiercely protective, brilliant, and had distrusted Marcus from the moment he met him. "Ben, I'm scared," she whispered, sinking to the floor. "Marcus, he's demanding I sign over 20% of my shares. He's not himself." He lied. He said it was collateral, but it's a liquidation. The silence on the other end was absolute and more terrifying than Marcus's rage. "Then, do not sign, Elara. Not one thing." Ben's voice was sharp, cutting through her panic. "I've been worried about his spending for months. This stinks. I'm 15 minutes away. Do not engage with him. If he comes back, tell him you're tired and you'll look at it in the morning. I'll wait by the main gate. Just in case. He's so angry, Ben." "I know. Lock your bedroom door. Call me if you even see him again tonight." He hung up. Elara was alone in the silent, dark office. The only sound was her own ragged breathing and, somewhere downstairs, the distant, furious sound of Marcus shouting into his phone. She was trapped in the house with him, but help was outside the gate. All she had to do was make it to morning. She crept to the door, her hand on the lock, and listened. The shouting had stopped. The house was completely, terribly silent. She felt a sudden ice-cold chill, and she didn't know why, but she found herself walking, not to her bedroom, but towards the back stairs that led to the kitchen. The heavy, suffocating silence of the house was a lie. Elara pushed open the kitchen door, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. She'd waited an hour, her heart a trapped bird against her ribs, until she was sure Marcus was asleep. She just needed a glass of water. But her blood turned to ice. He was there. He was sitting in the dark, a black silhouette against the moonlit counters. The only light was a small, malevolent blue dot from the electric kettle plugged in on the island. The document from the office was laid out flat beside it, a death warrant waiting for a signature. Thinking things over? His voice was unnervingly calm, a predator's purr that slid down her spine and made her skin crawl. Elara's hand, still on the door, was slick with sweat. I just came for some water, Marcus. Did you?" He didn't move. "Or did you come to your senses?" She swallowed, her throat painfully dry. Ben's voice echoed in her head. "Do not engage. Tell him you're tired." "I'm tired, Marcus. I'll look at it in the morning." "You'll look at it now." He stood, the movement so fast she flinched. He flicked the switch on the kettle. A low electric filled the kitchen, a sound of escalating, calculated threat. This was the moment. She realized it with a sickening, cold clarity. This was the moment she had been dreading for years, the one she'd lied to herself about. This wasn't about a bad investment. This was about control. All the small, invisible moments of his cruelty suddenly connected. The way he'd grip her arm in the hallway, his fingers bruising her. The way he'd punch the wall beside her head, close enough for her to feel the vibration, and then apologize with a passion that felt just as violent. She had told herself it was stress. She had told herself it was love. Her father's voice, a ghost in her memory, whispered, "Don't ever let a man like that hold the key." The boiling water wasn't for tea. It was a threat. The kettle was his weapon. The kitchen, her kitchen, the one she designed with warm, honey-colored wood, had just become an interrogation room. She backed away, her hand behind her fumbling for the counter. Trapped. "Marcus, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is insane. I won't sign this. Not tonight. Not without Ben looking at it." The name Ben was a match on gasoline. "The lawyer!" he roared, his calm facade shattering like glass. "Always the lawyer. You think he's smarter than me? You think your dead father was smarter than me?" He slammed his fist on the counter, the sound like a gunshot. I built this. I keep you safe. I protect you from a world that would eat you alive. This is my company, she cried out, a final spark of defiance in her terror. My fortune! The answer is no. The kettle clicked off. The sudden silence was absolute, filled only with the faint roiling bubble of boiling water. Marcus's face was a mask of pure reptilian rage. He looked at the kettle. He looked at her. You'll sign. He snatched the kettle from its base. Marcus, no, she screamed, throwing her arms up as she tried to flee. He roared, a sound of pure frustration, and poured agony, a white-hot searing fire that was nothing she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just heat. It was a liquid, melting pain that devoured her skin. She shrieked, a high-pitched, inhuman sound, as the scalding water cascaded down her forearm, her side, her hip. She collapsed onto the cold marble floor, writhing, the smell of her own cooked skin filling her nostrils. Outside, in the deep shadows of an oak tree, Ben Carter's thumb was pressed hard against his phone's screen. The kitchen window was open, just a crack left ajar for the cat, a detail Alara had mentioned to him once. He'd seen Marcus go back to the kitchen. He'd seen him turn on the kettle. He'd heard the shout, "You'll sign," and had hit record. His phone's microphone, sensitive in the night air, captured everything. The whoosh of the water, the agonizing, soul-tearing scream. And then, worst of all, Marcus's voice, not panic but cold, detached, and utterly without remorse. You did this to yourself. Ben stopped recording, his heart a cold stone of fury. He dialed 911. My name is Ben Carter. I have an assault in progress at 450 Willow Creek Lane. The victim is Alara Hayes. The assailant is her husband, Marcus Thorne. Send police and an ambulance. I am on site. He didn't wait for a reply. He dropped the phone and ran, vaulting the iron gate. Alara, lying on the floor, slipping into a vortex of pain, heard one last thing before the darkness swarmed her. The sound of her name, Alara, being shouted, not by her husband but by the one man her father had told her to trust. Help was coming. As the blackness pulled her under, her last conscious thought wasn't of Marcus, but of her best friend. Sarah. I need Sarah. A beep. A steady, rhythmic, impossible to ignore beep. Alara's eyelids fluttered, heavy as lead. The first sensation was fire. A deep, throbbing, liquid agony that seemed to have soaked into her very bones. Her arm, her chest, her side, it was a universe of pain, muffled only slightly by the thick, blessed fog of narcotics. The walls were a pale, sterile white. She gasped, a dry, papery sound. She's awake. Alara's head swam. A uniformed police officer stood near her door, a new character in her nightmare. His face was neutral, his presence a cold, official fact. Her memory flooded back in a horrifying, scalding rush. The kitchen, the dark, the click of the kettle. Marcus. She croaked, the word tearing her throat. He tried. The officer just nodded, his expression unreadable. Your husband is in the hallway, ma'am. He's devastated. Alara's blood ran cold, a chill that fought the fire in her skin. He told us what happened, the officer continued, his voice monotone. He said you slipped on the marble, that you reached for the counter and accidentally pulled the kettle down on yourself. A terrible, terrible accident. The lie hung in the sterile air, more toxic than the smell of antiseptic. He's lying. The ease with which he'd crafted the story, the performance he must be giving right now in the hallway, was as cruel as the attack itself. He hadn't just burned her. He was erasing the truth, painting her as a clumsy, foolish victim of her own mistake. The door opened. Not Marcus. It was Ben Carter. His face was a grim, exhausted mask of fury. He nodded once to the officer, who stepped outside, pulling the door almost shut, giving them the illusion of privacy. Ben moved to her bedside. His usual stern, lawyerly expression was gone, replaced by a deep paternal grief that made her want to weep. Alara, he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. He told them I slipped, she whispered, the words tasting like poison. He lied, Ben. I know, Ben said. He leaned in close, his presence a fortress in her sea of pain. He's lying to them, but it doesn't matter. Ilara, he pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, holding it up just enough for her to see. I was at the window. I heard everything. Her drugged mind struggled to connect the pieces. You were. I recorded it, Ilara. He didn't play it. He just let the words sink into her. A drop of pure, cold justice. I recorded everything. Her eyes, wide with shock, locked onto his. The fog of pain receded for a moment, replaced by a dawning, terrible clarity. He said, "You'll sign." He did, Ben confirmed, his face carved from granite. He's trapped. We have him. We have the assault, the motive, the intent. But you need to heal. We do this on our terms, not theirs. No arrests here. Not yet. A tear, hot and stinging, slid into her hair. He was right. She could heal. She wasn't alone. She had Ben, and she had Sierra, she whispered, a desperate, hopeful breath, her last thought before passing out. Does Sierra know? I need her. As if summoned by her voice, the door opened again. Ilara. Oh, thank God. Sarah. Davies rushed in, her face a perfect mask of tear-streaked panic. A wave of profound, aching relief washed over Ilara. Sarah, her oldest friend, her sister in all but blood. She was here. Ilara tried to lift her good arm, her hand fluttering weakly. Sierra. But Sierra's eyes, wide with fear, were locked on the hallway. She bypassed Ilara's bed completely, as if Ilara were just a piece of furniture, a part of the sterile white room. She rushed past her, into the hallway, and threw herself not at Ilara but into Marcus's arms. Through the open door, Ilara had a perfect, horrifying, unobstructed view. Sarah sobbing, clinging to Marcus, her hands rubbing his back in deep, comforting circles. Oh, Marcus, you poor thing. Her voice, so full of anguish, was directed entirely at him. Is she going to be okay? You must be so scared. She was comforting the man who had just tried to murder her. Ilara's breath hitched. The physical pain from her burns was nothing, a dull, distant echo compared to the new, soul-crushing agony ripping through her chest. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. Sarah, still holding Marcus, turned her head slightly. Her eyes, no longer filled with tears, met Ilara's across the room. There was no worry in them, no friendship, only a cold, sharp, and unmistakable glint of triumphant contempt. Ben watched Ilara's face. He saw the last flicker of her quiet devotion die, and he knew, with chilling certainty, that the woman who left this hospital would not be the same one who entered it. The fight wasn't just for survival anymore, it was for war. Triple? No! Marcus, no! The scream, thin and digitized, was 1,000 times more horrifying than the memory. It was the sound of a soul tearing, captured in a digital file, stripped of all humanity. Ilara Hayes sat perfectly still, her face a mask of cold porcelain. She did not flinch. She did not cry. She just stared at the antique, polished surface of Ben Carter's desk, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. 3 weeks had passed. The frightened, devoted woman who had collapsed on the kitchen floor was gone, burned away with the layers of her skin. This new woman, her arm encased in a beige medical compression sleeve, simply listened. Ben's finger hovered over his phone. The recording continued, the terrifying whoosh of the water, the sizzle. And then, Marcus's voice, not angry, but as cold and sterile as the kitchen itself. You did this to yourself. Ben hit stop. The sudden heavy silence in the rotting, leather and mahogany office was louder and more violent than the scream had been. It makes me sick, Ilara said. Her voice was different. The warm, gentle tone was gone, replaced by a low, hard rasp that seemed to come from her very bones. Every time I hear it, I want to tear the world down. She finally looked up, her eyes, once soft and trusting, now like chips of ice. That is aggravated assault. It's attempted murder. Why isn't he in a cell, Ben? Why are we sitting here, in your office, listening to this like it's a piece of evidence? Ben Carter steepled his fingers. He had been her father's bulldog, the man who'd torn corporate raiders to shreds for decades. Now, he was her bulldog. Because assault gets him 2 years, Maybe 3 with a good lawyer, Ben said, his voice a low growl. He'll claim it was a crime of passion. He'll say you provoked him. He'll cry in court. He'll get out, and he'll still have his hands in your money. No. He leaned forward, his own eyes burning with a cold fury that matched hers. Ruining him, takes planning. This recording, he tapped his phone, is our nuclear option, Ilara. We don't use it to start the war. We use it to end it. Right now, he thinks you're a broken, frightened victim, hiding in a hospital, too ashamed to show your face. He thinks that recording doesn't exist. He's getting arrogant. He is, Ilara said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. He's arrogant. And he's comfortable. What do you mean? I have a cleaner still on the payroll, Maria. The only one he hasn't fired yet. Ilara's gaze met Ben's, and the pure, unadulterated rage in her eyes made even him pause. She called me this morning. My clothes are in black trash bags in the guest wing. Hers are in my closet. Sarah has moved into the estate. She's sleeping in my bed. The double betrayal, the physical and the emotional, hung in the air between them, thick and toxic. Ben, for a split second, looked genuinely murderous. Then, his expression settled back into one of cold, calculating strategy. Good, he said, the word a sharp, sudden click. Ilara's head snapped up. Good? Ben, she was my best friend. Good, he repeated, standing and walking to the window, looking down at the busy city street. Let them build their prison together. Let them get comfortable in your house, spending your money. Let them think they've won. He turned back to her, a predator's smile playing on his lips. He thinks you're alone and broken. He thinks he's fighting a ghost. He's wrong, she whispered. We're going to build our army, Ilara. And the first soldier we hire doesn't use a gun. She uses a calculator. And she's the best bloodhound in the city. The sharp, metallic click of a high-end briefcase latch echoed in the sterile, glass-walled room. We're live. The voice was new, clipped, precise, and holding zero emotion. Ilara Hayes didn't turn. She simply stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse. This was not her home. This was her fortress. A high-tech, secure safe house leased by Ben, overlooking the city that still thought she was a broken victim, hidden away and nursing her burns. Her arm, still in its compression sleeve, ached with a dull, constant throb, a perfect match for the new, cold fury in her heart. Ilara, Ben Carter said, his voice softer. This is the woman I told you about. Our bloodhound. Ilara turned. Standing by the marble table was Zara Qasim. She was in her 40s, with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. She wasn't a lawyer or a bodyguard. She was, as Ben had explained, the most ruthless forensic accountant and private investigator in the country. Her reputation was that of a predator who hunted numbers, not people. Mr. Carter filled me in on the assault, Zara said, her voice as severe as her black suit. She didn't offer sympathy. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She just nodded at Ilara's bandaged arm. That's barbaric. But I'm not here for the blood. I'm here for the numbers. She set her laptop on the table, plugged it in, and the wall-mounted screen flickered to life. Let's begin. Your husband's failed venture, the one he used to demand the 20%? It was a lie, Ilara said, her voice a low rasp. A very lazy one, Zara agreed. It's a shell corporation in Panama, set up 3.5 years ago. Ilara's breath hitched. 3 years. This wasn't a new plan. This wasn't a sudden, desperate act. This was a long, slow, meticulous betrayal. The man she had loved, the man she had protected and made excuses for, had been bleeding her dry while he kissed her goodnight. The $50,000 invoice from that last morning, it was just a single, arrogant drop in an ocean of deceit. She felt a wave of crushing, humiliating sickness. He hadn't just seen her as a wife. He'd seen her as a target. He's been systematically siphoning your legacy accounts for 3 years, Zara continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A complex web of charts and numbers filled the screen. For how much? Ilara's voice was barely a whisper, but it was hard as steel. $8,200,044 so far. Ilara closed her eyes. 8 million. The vacations. the surprise gifts, the bonuses he'd paid himself. It was all stolen. Where did it go? Gambling? Offshore accounts? What? Zara clicked a key, and a new file tree appeared on the screen. That's what's interesting, Miss Hayes. A small, cold smile touched her lips for the first time. He's not a gambler. He's a nester. The money isn't just gone. It's been converted. She looked up from her laptop, her dark, knowing eyes meeting Alara's. What's interesting isn't what he stole. It's what he bought. She clicked on a master folder labeled Acquisitions. It seems he and your best friend, Miss Davies, share a mutual love for real estate. The scar was angry tonight. It was a violent, raised map of her own stupidity, an ever-present, itching, pulling reminder of the man she had loved and the fool she had been. Alara stood in the vast, marble bathroom of the penthouse, the compression sleeve pulled at her feet. She stared at her own reflection, at the ruined, mottled skin of her arm, and the sight of it finally broke through her cold, calculated rage. A single hot tear of pure, unadulterated regret slipped down her cheek. She hated the scar, but she hated the girl who had let it happen even more. Her reflection blurred, the harsh lines of the modern bathroom dissolving, the face in the mirror softening, the skin becoming flawless, the eyes becoming naive. The memory was so clear it was a haunting. She was 25, standing by her father's side at the Hayes Industries Gala. She was wearing a simple blue dress, and she couldn't stop staring at the impossibly handsome, impossibly charming man who had just joined the finance department, Marcus Thorne. He was laughing across the room, and she was captivated. He's charming, Alara. The voice was a warm, familiar rumble. Arthur Hayes, her father, the brilliant, kind, and impossibly sharp founder of their empire, was watching her, not Marcus. He seems very passionate about the company, Daddy, she'd stammered, a blush rising on her cheeks. Arthur had sighed, a soft, sad sound. He'd put his large, warm hand on her cheek, turning her face to look at him. Charm is the currency of the man who has none of his own. Remember that. You have a good heart, Alara. A soft heart. His eyes were kind, but sad. I love that about you, but the world is run by men who see a soft heart as an open door. Don't ever, ever let a man like that hold the key. Daddy, don't be so cynical. She'd laughed, pulling away, her eyes already drifting back to Marcus. He's just nice. Her father hadn't said another word. He just watched her walk away, his face a mask of love and profound, heartbreaking worry. The memory snapped. The gala dissolved. The soft, 5-year-old girl was gone. In the mirror, the 5-year-old woman, scarred and forged in ice, stared back. She touched the angry red scar on her arm, the keyhole he had forced open. He didn't just hold the key, Father, she whispered to the empty, silent penthouse. He lived in the house. He ate at the table. He slept in the bed. She pulled the compression sleeve back on, her movements slow, deliberate, and final. Her eyes in the mirror were as cold and dead as her father's warning had been wise. Now, I'm changing the locks. And thanks to Zara, I know exactly which other houses he's been hiding his keys in. The click of Zara's keyboard was the only sound. And then, the image. It filled the massive 80-inch screen in the penthouse. It wasn't a grainy, distant shot. It was high resolution, long lens, and absolutely undeniable. Marcus and Sarah, on the balcony of a sleek, modern condo Alara had never seen. They weren't just kissing. It was a devouring, passionate embrace, his hands tangled in her hair, her body pressed against his. It was the kiss of long-term lovers, not a sordid new fling. Alara Hayes did not cry. The woman who wept was gone, burned away. The woman who remained simply stared, her nails digging so hard into the palm of her good hand that she drew blood. When? Her voice was a low, dangerous rasp. 6 days ago, Zara said, her voice clinical, like a surgeon reporting a finding. She clicked again. A new photo. Sarah, laughing, trying on a diamond necklace that Alara recognized one she had admired, and Marcus had claimed was vulgar. Click. Marcus, signing paperwork for a black sports car. Sarah at his side, her hand possessively on his shoulder. The condo is in Sarah's name, Zara said, her words like hammer blows. The car is in Sarah's name. The necklace, well, that was from the Hayes Legacy account, marked corporate gifting, paid for 3 months ago. So the 8 million, Ilara whispered, the betrayal of physical, choking thing in her throat. It was for her, for this, new life. Not just new, Miss Hayes, Zara said, finally turning from her screen to look at Ilara. Her dark, intelligent eyes held a trace of something. Pity, perhaps, but mostly just fact. The affair isn't new. She typed a command, and a timeline appeared on the screen. A spider web of bank transfers, hotel charges, and hidden payments. My data shows this has been going on for 5 years. The number hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. 5 years. Ilara stumbled back, sinking into a chair. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was her entire recent history, rewritten as a lie. 5 years, before her father died. Before, oh God, Sarah, holding her hand at the funeral, weeping genuine tears. Sarah, comforting her through the lonely nights. Sarah, encouraging her to trust Marcus more. Her best friend, her oldest friend. She had been the enemy inside the gates all along. The pity job Ilara had given her wasn't a lifeline. It was tactical access. The jealousy Ilara had sometimes sensed hadn't been jealousy at all. It had been ambition. So that's it, Ilara said, standing up, the ice-cold fury returning. A welcome shield. He was stealing to build a nest for his mistress. He got in too deep, needed the 20% to cover what he'd already stolen, and I said no. It was a clean, simple, ugly story. That's a clean narrative, Zara said, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. But it's wrong. Ilara froze. What? The math doesn't work, Zara said, turning to face her fully. The condo, the car, the jewelry, that's maybe 1 million. Tops. The other 7 million, Miss Hayes? She leaned in, her voice dropping. It didn't go to Sarah. It went here. And I have no idea what this is. She hit a key, and a new file appeared on the screen. A single, encrypted transfer to an offshore account with a name that meant nothing. It was a black hole. $7 million, Zara whispered, is a lot to hide, even from your mistress. That's not nest egg money, Ilara. That's life or death money. It's not a black hole, Miss Hayes. It's a sewer. Zara's voice was sharp, cutting through Ilara's shocked silence. The $7 million question hung in the air, dark and terrifying. Zara's fingers flew across the keys, and the encrypted account name on the screen was suddenly replaced by a simple, ugly logo. An offshore, high-stakes sports betting ring. The failed venture was a lie. The affair was a distraction, Zara said, her voice dropping. The 8 million he stole wasn't for Sarah. It was to cover his tracks, to pay the interest, to keep the wolves from the door. He's a gambling addict, Ilara. A high-stakes, desperate one. The words hit Ilara harder than the boiling water. An affair, she could understand. Greed, she could comprehend. But this was a sickness, a rot that went to the bone. Zara didn't stop. She pulled up another file, a ledger, a simple, brutal list of dates, bets, and losses. The numbers were astronomical. He's in for $30 million, Ilara. He had a deadline. They were going to collect. The air left Ilara's lungs. 30 million. All the pieces of her fractured life suddenly, horrifically, slammed into place. His stress, his constant, frantic phone calls, his new, violent rages, his obsession with his legacy. He hadn't been building a future. He'd been running from a debt that was about to bury him. She looked at the screen, then at Zara, her mind working with the cold, fast precision of her scientist brain. The 20%, she whispered. My 50 million wasn't to fix a company, Zara confirmed, her voice grim. It was to pay off his bookie before they collected. Ilara stood up and walked to the window, staring down at the city lights, but seeing only the dark, sterile kitchen. She saw his face, contorted in that ugly, unfamiliar snarl. She heard the click of the kettle. She saw his hand, steady, as he grabbed it. It wasn't greed. It wasn't rage at her. It was panic. It was the frantic, sloppy terror of a man about to be destroyed. So the boiling water, she said, her voice a dead flat monotone. That was desperation. The desperation of a cornered violent animal about to lose its life, Zara said quietly. And he was willing to trade yours for it. Ilara closed her eyes. The humiliation, the pain, the betrayal, it all coalesced into a single, diamond-hard point of understanding. He wasn't a monster. He was just a rat. A weak, terrified, cornered rat. And he thought he had burned her to death, that she was gone. She turned from the window, her face a mask of terrible cold calm. He's still in my house, she said. He's sitting in my chair, sleeping in my bed, spending my money. He and Sarah, they think they're safe. They think they've won. She looked at Zara, and for the first time in her life, Ilara smiled without a trace of warmth. He thinks he's a lion who's taken over the pride. He's about to find out he's a rat in a cage. And I'm the one who's about to shut the door. And action. The red light on the camera was a single, predatory eye. Ilara Hayes sat, not in the sterile safe penthouse, but in the sterile cold studio of a high-end PR firm. She was dressed in a deep, sapphire blue suit. Her hair was pulled back, not in a soft, gentle style, but in a severe, powerful bun. Her face was a mask of polished, corporate calm. The makeup artist, a young, nervous woman, had approached her earlier with a pot of the thickest concealer. For the, ma'am, she had whispered, gesturing to the angry, red map of scar tissue on Ilara's forearm. Ilara had held up her hand. No, don't touch it. I want them to see. Now, she looked directly into the camera lens, past the crew, past the lights, and into the living rooms of the people who mattered. This was not a plea. It was a declaration. Good evening, she said. Her voice, once soft and hesitant, was the new, hard, resonant tone she had found in Ben's office. For the past 6 weeks, there has been speculation regarding my health and the leadership of Hayes Industries. Cut to the Hayes estate, her home, her living room. Marcus Thorne swirled a glass of Ilara's father's best scotch, his feet propped up on her priceless antique coffee table. Sarah, wrapped in one of Ilara's silk robes, was curled on the sofa beside him, painting her nails a dark, vampiric red. The evening news droned on in the background. And now, a special announcement from Hayes Industries, the news anchor said. Sarah looked up, bored. Oh God, is she going to cry to the press? My mean husband left me. Then Ilara's face filled the screen. Sarah's hand froze, the red polish brush hovering. Marcus sat up, pulling his feet off the table. The woman on the screen was not the mousy, frightened, quietly devoted girl he had married. This Ilara was cold. She was beautiful. And the scar, it was visible. A defiant, ugly testament that she was choosing to show. She looks good, Sarah said, her voice faltering, a note of pure, venomous jealousy in it. On the screen, Ilara continued, her gaze unwavering. After a difficult period of restructuring, I am thrilled to announce the return of the Hayes Legacy Gala 1 month from today. Marcus's glass stopped halfway to his lips. The gala, his gala, the one he had planned to use to cement his power after he'd secured the 20%. I am thrilled, Ilara said again, her eyes seeming to pierce the very screen, to be taking back the reins of my family's company. I will be announcing our new and very aggressive future direction at the gala. Taking back the reins? Sarah scoffed, but her voice was laced with a new nervousness. Who does she think she is? She can't even balance a checkbook. She's nothing without you, Marcus. Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at the screen, his mind racing. She was alone. She was scared. She didn't know about the $30 million debt. She didn't know the bookies were getting impatient. This wasn't strength. This was a bluff. A desperate, pathetic bluff from a woman in over her head. A slow, arrogant, and utterly fatal smirk spread across his handsome face. She's bluffing, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. He stood up, walking closer to the TV, looking down on his wife's image as if he were a god. She's not strong, Sarah. She's desperate. This is a cry for help. What are you talking about? Sarah asked, confused. She looks furious. She's pretending. He hissed, his confidence surging, the lie becoming his truth. She's finally realized she can't do it without me. Restructuring. New direction. Don't you see? He let out a short, sharp, ugly laugh. She's going to announce her new direction at the gala. She's going to stand on that stage, in front of the entire world, and she's going to beg me to come back. He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes gleaming. She's going to make me CEO. She just needs to do it publicly to save face. The announcement ended. Marcus lifted his glass in a mock toast to the blank screen. He had no idea he had just RSVP'd to his own execution, and he had no idea that Ilara's new direction had a name. Zara Qasim. The roar of the flashbulbs was a deafening, blinding storm. Marcus, over here, Sarah. How is Ilara? At the grand entrance of the ballroom, Marcus Thorne and Serafina Davies stood triumphant, a portrait of tragic, beautiful loyalty. Marcus, handsome and somber in a custom tuxedo, held Sarah's hand tightly. He was the perfect, supportive husband, standing by his wife in her time of need. And Sarah was a vision in emerald green silk, her head held high, her smile a perfect blend of concern and beauty. And around her throat, winking like a cruel star under the chandeliers, was the stolen diamond necklace. They were performers, and this was their masterpiece. They worked the room, Marcus accepting sympathetic handshakes from board members, Sarah receiving air kisses from socialites. They were the king and queen of this glittering, million-dollar lie. High above them, hidden in the shadows of the AV control booth, Ilara Hayes watched them on a monitor. She was a ghost in a blood-red dress. The dress was sleeveless, a deliberate, defiant choice. Her scarred arm, healed into a map of mottled red and silver skin, was visible for the entire world to see. It was not a weakness, it was her armor. She watched them laugh. She watched Sarah, her oldest friend, touch the necklace at her throat, a small, possessive gesture. They were so arrogant, so comfortable. They truly believed they had won. They thought this gala was their coronation. They had no idea it was their execution. Beside her, Ben Carter, her father's loyal bulldog, adjusted his black tie, his face a grim mask. A small, clear voice crackled in his earpiece. Audio is ready, Zara Qasim's voice said, clinical and calm from her post at the main tech board. Video is cued, and the police are on standby at the service entrance, just as you requested. We are green. Good, Ben murmured. He turned to Ilara. The noise, the music, the 300 guests below it all faded away. His eyes, fierce and protective, met hers. It's time, Ilara. Are you ready? Ilara looked away from the monitor, her gaze sweeping over the opulent ballroom. She saw them, Marcus and Sarah, taking their seats at the front table. Her heart wasn't pounding with fear. It was a slow, cold, heavy drumbeat of pure, unadulterated resolve. Ready. Down. On the main stage, the lights dimmed. A single, brilliant spotlight hit the podium. The host stepped up, his voice booming. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a woman of incredible strength and vision, please welcome back the true heart of Hayes Industries, Ilara Hayes. The room exploded in applause. Ilara stepped from the darkness, walking into the blinding white light. Her red dress was a slash of color against the stage. She saw Marcus. He was smiling, clapping, his face a perfect mask of pride. He still thought this was his night. He had no idea she was about to introduce him to the truth. The applause was a physical, deafening wave. It washed over Ilara Hayes, 1,000 hands trying to welcome back a woman who no longer existed. The single, blinding white spotlight was hotter than the kettle's steam, a sterile, examining glare. She gripped the sides of the podium, her knuckles white. Every journalist, every board member, every rival and ally her family had ever known was staring, their eyes flicking from her face to the angry, raw scar on her arm, a scar she had deliberately left uncovered. This was it, the ultimate stage. Her gaze swept the front table, and her heart, instead of pounding with fear, settled into a slow, cold, heavy drumbeat of pure resolve. Marcus was smiling. He was beaming. He was looking at her with a sickening, possessive pride, as if he had crafted this moment, as if her trauma had been a small price to pay for this triumphant return. He nudged Sarah, who was clapping dutifully, her eyes like glittering green chips of glass, locked on Ilara with pure, venomous hatred. He still thought this was his coronation. Ilara took a deep breath. The vast, opulent ballroom fell into a sudden, expectant hush. The clinking of champagne flutes stopped. 300 people held their breath. "Welcome," she said. Her new voice, the one forged in Ben's office, was perfectly amplified. It was calm, clear, and cut through the silence like a diamond. "I am Ilara Hayes, and tonight, we are here to celebrate truth." She paused, letting the single, dangerous word land. "My father, Arthur Hayes, whose legacy this gala honors, always said one thing: you can't build a legacy on a lie." She saw Marcus in the front row. He nodded, smiled, and lifted his glass to her in a toast, as if in agreement. He thought she was talking about business, about competitors. He had no idea the lie was him. "For 5 years," Ilara continued, her eyes sweeping the room before landing, with the force of a physical blow, right on her husband. "I have been living a lie," the room murmured, a ripple of confusion. Marcus's smile became one of profound, fake sympathy. This is it, he thought, her confession. He leaned forward, ready to be celebrated as the man who had saved her from herself. "I was told I was weak," Ilara said, her voice dropping, becoming intimate, as if she were telling a secret to 300 people. "That I needed protecting, that I was just a soft heart, meant to be kept in a gilded cage." She leaned into the microphone. "I was told, specifically, to sign and don't trouble my pretty head." The air sucked out of the room. That phrase, it was so specific, so condescending. The whispers started instantly. Across the ballroom, board members shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's smile froze. His face went rigid. The color drained from his cheeks. This was not the speech. Ilara didn't look away from him. Her gaze was a spike, pinning him to his chair. "I was told my company was failing," she said, her voice rising, each word a hammer blow against the silence. "I was told my family's legacy was turning to ash. I was told the only way to save it was to sign over 20% of my fortune." A collective, audible gasp. This wasn't a speech, it was an indictment. Sarah's hand flew to her stolen necklace, her face pale with shock. "And when I refused," Ilara said, her voice now a low, terrible whisper that carried to every corner of the ballroom. "When I finally said no, my husband had an accident." She let the lie hang in the air, the same ugly word he had told the police. She watched his mask of arrogance crack, revealing the raw, cornered panic underneath. The entire room was frozen, staring at him, then at her. "He told the world I slipped," she said, her voice suddenly terrifyingly sweet. "But he forgot one small detail. He forgot about the open window. He told the police I slipped." Ilara's voice was a blade in the silent, frozen ballroom. "He told the world I was clumsy, but he didn't know one thing." She turned her head, her gaze finding Ben Carter in the dark wings of the stage. He had been her father's protector. Now, he was hers. He gave a single, sharp nod. The signal was given. Ilara turned back to the front row, her eyes locking onto Marcus. He was no longer smiling. He was a statue of dawning, sickening horror, his face a waxy pale yellow under the hot lights. He was finally, understanding. "My lawyer, Ben Carter, was outside the kitchen window, just in case," she said, her voice dropping, clear and cold. She looked at her husband. She looked at the 300 witnesses. She looked at the woman wearing her diamonds. "Play it." The word was a command. And in the control booth, Zara, Kasim hit the key. The lights in the ballroom did not dim. They snapped off. The entire opulent room was plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. The guests gasped, a collective wave of shock. There was nothing to see. No Ilara, no stage, no Marcus. There was only the massive black void of the screen behind the podium. And then, the sound. The state-of-the-art speakers, designed for celebratory music, instead broadcast a murder. Marcus audio. "You'll sign." The voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the charming, suave host. It was a brutal, guttural roar. In the dark, a woman screamed. Elara audio. No, Marcus, no! Her voice was thin, terrified. A desperate, reedy plea that was a galaxy away from the powerful woman who had just been speaking. And then, the sound that made 300 people sick. Sound. The electric whoosh of the water leaving the kettle. The horrifying, unmistakable sizzle as it made contact with human skin. Elara. Audio. Triple. AGGGHHH. The shriek was not a word. It was the sound of a soul being burned. It was pure, unadulterated agony, and it filled every corner of the vast dark room. People were sobbing. A man in the front row, a hardened CEO, was physically ill. And then, the final, damning proof. The silence after the scream, broken only by Elara's agonized whimpers, and Marcus's voice. Not panicked, not sorry, not even angry, just cold. Marcus. Audio. You did this to yourself. The audio clicked off. The darkness and the silence that followed were absolute. It was a suffocating, shared void of pure, collective horror. For 3 full seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. In that silence, Elara Hayes could hear her own heart. It was slow, it was steady. It was the sound of a war being won. She watched the pale, terrified silhouettes of Marcus and Sarah at the front table, paralyzed in the dark. They were trapped, exposed, and utterly, totally ruined. The silence stretched, 1, 2, and then the room erupted. It was not applause. It was a roar of human outrage. Monster! A woman shrieked from the back. Oh my God! Another sobbed. The lights slammed back on, not the soft, gentle gala lighting, but harsh, bright, accusatory white light pinning Marcus and Sarah to their table like insects to a board. Marcus was a broken thing, his mouth open, his face a mask of waxy, sweaty ruin. Sarah was ashen, her eyes wide, staring at Marcus with pure, unadulterated terror. Elara stood at the podium, a figure in blood red, her face carved from ice. She hadn't moved. She let the roar of outrage wash over her. Then she raised one hand. The screen behind her, no longer black, flickered. It wasn't over. The audio was just the introduction. Now came the evidence. The roar was instantaneous, a wave of human fury. Monster! A woman shrieked from the back. Call the police! Another shouted, his voice cracking. The entire, opulent ballroom was on its feet. A sea of 300 black-tie witnesses, their faces contorted in disbelief and rage. All the cameras, all the phones, were no longer pointed at Elara. They were pointed at the front table, at the 2 pale, paralyzed figures. Marcus Thorne was a breathing corpse. His face was a waxy, sweaty, slack-jawed mask of ruin. He was staring at the podium, but his eyes were dead. Sarah, however, was fragmenting. No. She was whimpering, looking around frantically, as if searching for an exit that wasn't surrounded by hundreds of hostile faces. No. It wasn't. He wouldn't. Elara Hayes raised her hand. Not for silence. For attention. Please, she said, her voice a blade of ice, cutting through the chaos. Please, don't stop him. He's not done. The crowd quieted, confused. The massive screen behind Elara, which had been black, flickered. The angry, confused roar of the crowd died, replaced by a new, horrified, collective gasp. You have heard the what? Elara said, her voice cold and amplified. Now, here is the why. The screen lit up. It wasn't a photo. It was a dark, complex ledger. At the bottom, a number in red, -$30.000 million. This wasn't a crime of passion. Elara's voice narrated, as cold and clinical as Zara Kassim's. This was a business transaction. My husband, Marcus Thorne, is a gambling addict. He was $30 million in debt to people who do not take no for an answer. The 20% he demanded from me, it wasn't for the company. It was for them. Marcus let out a low, animal moan. But he couldn't just ask for the money, Elara continued, because he'd already been stealing from me for years. The screen changed. A new file tree, the Panama Shell Corporation, The bank transfers, $8.00 million. And he had, help. The screen changed again. And the room, which thought it could not be more shocked, erupted. It was the photo from Zara's file. Marcus and Sarah, on the balcony, locked in a passionate, devouring kiss. It was followed by the deed to the condo, in Sarah's name, the receipt for the sports car, in Sarah's name, and then, the final, brutal stroke, the screen split. On one side, the jewelry store's high-res photo of the stolen diamond necklace. On the other side, a live close-up feed from a camera in the ballroom, zooming in on Sarah's terrified, pale throat, showing her wearing that exact necklace at that very moment. Sarah shrieked, a thin animal sound of pure, unadulterated panic, her hands flying to her throat, clawing at the diamonds as if they were on fire. This was not an accident, Ilara's voice boomed, thundering over Sarah's sobs. This was aggravated assault. This was attempted grand theft. This was conspiracy to defraud. This was the desperate, pathetic act of a gambler, a thief, and his mistress. She let the words hang in the air. Then, she looked to the back of the ballroom. And it is over. On that cue, the main ballroom doors swung open. Two uniformed police officers, who had been waiting at the service entrance, walked calmly and deliberately down the center aisle. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, a stunned, silent mass. The officers didn't look at Ilara. They didn't look at the screen. They walked directly to the front table, their footsteps the only sound in the vast, silent room. Marcus Thorne? Serafina Davies? The first officer said, his voice calm, official, and utterly final. You're both under arrest. Sarah fainted. She simply crumpled to the floor in a heap of green silk and stolen diamonds. Marcus did not. He just broke. He let out a single, hollow, empty sigh and collapsed forward, his head hitting the table with a dull, heavy thud. Ilara watched them. She watched the police pull Marcus's unresisting arms behind his back. She watched them haul a sobbing, hysterical Sarah to her feet. The rage was gone. The pain was gone. All that was left was a vast, cold, empty space. This part was finished. But as the flashbulbs erupted, turning the arrest into a global spectacle, she knew, with chilling certainty, this was not the end. This was just the public part. The real battle, the one for her father's company, was just beginning. The motion passes. Unanimously. You are all dismissed. The click of Ilara's pen hitting the mahogany boardroom table was as final as a gavel. The three remaining executives, Marcus's old guard, sat frozen, their faces pale with shock. 1 week after the gala, Ilara Hayes sat at the head of her table, in her father's chair. His portrait, smiling down from the wall, seemed to approve. Mr. Jensen, Mr. Cole, Mr. Abernathy, she said, her voice a blade of ice. You had a fiduciary duty to this company, one you ignored in favor of loyalty to a gambler and a thief. Security will escort you from the building. Your severance will be the exact amount you missed on his fraudulent expense reports. 0. You can't do this, Jensen stammered. I just did, Ilara said. She looked to the door, where Zara Kasim stood, holding a new binder. Miss Kasim, welcome to the board. As our new chief financial officer, your first order of business is a full, deep dive audit of every executive account. Let's see how deep the rot goes. Zara smiled, a thin, predatory expression. With pleasure, Miss Hayes. Ilara had taken back her company. 6 months later, the sterile white of a courtroom was a dull, anticlimactic backdrop. Marcus Thorne, gaunt and broken, his expensive suit replaced by an ill-fitting one, could barely stand as the judge read the verdict. The audio recording had been the key. It was undeniable. On the charge of aggravated assault, this court sentences you to 10 years. On the charge of conspiracy to defraud, 7 years. On financial crimes, 3 years. To be served consecutively, 20 years. Ilara sat in the front row, her face a mask of calm. She didn't watch Marcus as he was led away. Instead, she watched Sarah. Sarah, who had testified against him, her face a tear-streaked ruin, received her own sentence, 5 years for conspiracy. As they cuffed her, Sarah's eyes, full of a pathetic, desperate hatred, found Ilara's. Ilara simply held her gaze, offering nothing. No pity. No forgiveness. Just nothing. She had taken back her justice. 1 year later. The sun was streaming into the kitchen. It was no longer a cold, sterile, marble prison. Ilara had renovated it completely. The dark, threatening counters were gone, replaced with warm, honey-colored butcher block. The walls were a soft, sunny yellow. It was a room filled with light. Ilara sat at a small breakfast table, her arm no longer in a sleeve. The scar was there, a faint, silver map against her skin, but it no longer ached. She took a sip of tea. Ben Carter sat across from her, a small pile of papers between them. He pushed the final one toward her. And with that, he said, his voice soft, the old, stern bulldog finally at peace, the divorce is final. He is legally, financially, and physically out of your life. He has no claim to you, your company, or your name. You are free, Ilara. Ilara picked up the pen. She signed her name Ilara Hayes with a steady, confident hand. She looked down at her scar, tracing the faint, silvery line with her finger, a small, private smile touching her lips. He was right about one thing, Ben, she said quietly. Ben raised an eyebrow. What's that? Ilara looked up, her eyes, once chips of ice, now clear, bright, and brilliantly alive. She took a sip of her tea. I am smarter than him. She turned to look out the new, wide window at the garden she had just planted. Her mind was already on the new biotech patent she was filing that afternoon. The revenge was over. The real work could finally begin.